we've arrived at Part 1, Chapter 27, just the way you like it. And this is, in this case, the reproductive system, beginning with the male anatomy and physiology. So we're going to begin with, in some ways, the simpler format here. The female format is considerably more complicated by multiple hormones, as well as being the individual who carries the, how shall I say, the little condominium for the newborn, which is the uterus. And there's a constant ongoing maintenance of the uterus through life from puberty to the end of the possibilities there near the age of late 40s or 50 in that area. Okay, so menopause at that point. So we'll begin with the simplest of the two, and that is the male reproductive anatomy. Here we have a picture of something that is sort of mid-sagittal, but then it has some things that are more lateral connected with it as well. So if we're looking here, here's the bony structure, just to get you oriented right here. The pubic symphysis would be right about here. And coming through the pelvic outlet would be the urethra. Coming above the top of the bony structure, in this case, right before puberty, or right before birth, the newborn, usually of the male persuasion, is going to have the descent of the testis. We have a different picture that shows that a little bit better than this one. Okay, but coming down with the testis comes all of the equipment that supports the testis. We don't show it in that picture very well. We just show our passageway then for the gametes of the male, which are sperm. So here we have the testis, where the primordial cells are, and the very beginnings of sperm development happens. Sperm, however, even though it's initiated here in the testis, sperm does not mature, nor is it stored in the testis. It is actually having to leave the testis, come over to the epididymis, where it engages in further biochemical maturation. I like to say it has swimming lessons here for some weeks of time, and then so finally it becomes mature, and then is stored as mature sperm or gametes for the possibility of creating a zygote and conceiving a new individual. Okay, so up here we have the epididymal head, we have the epididymal tail, we have the very beginning of the ductus deferens or vas deferens coming up this way. You'll notice that passageway goes up above here through the inguinal canal, and so the passageway ultimately goes posterior, picks up some seminal fluid. We find this location right here, which is the prostate gland. We have something called the ejaculatory duct, where things come to rest briefly. Okay, so ejaculatory duct is in the tissue of the prostate, and then ultimately the passage of sperm out is going to actually utilize the passageway for urine. So the urethra becomes the passageway for the sperm as well. There's a special gland here called the bulbourethral gland, and it has alkaline bicarb, little bit of fluid. And what that does is it actually cleans and neutralizes the passageway here, which might have very acidic urine prior to the event of ejaculation. And so if we clean it a little bit with some bicarb, then we have a neutral pathway for the sperm. The sperm, like pretty much the pH of the rest of the body, which is 7 or 7.4. And so they're more, how would I say, active as swimmers in that particular situation. Remember that we're talking about hundreds of millions as a little sort of army, as it were, of gametes coming out through here. They only have to find one egg, but they never ask for directions, I suppose. So you need hundreds of millions. So the idea here is that, nevertheless, we do have erectile tissue. All of this blue colored structure here represents erectile tissue. You can see that this erectile tissue, well, this is called the bulb of the penis. It's also part of the erectile tissue. Then this portion that's containing the urethra is referred to as the corpus spongiosum, and so the urethra here is called the spongy urethra. The dorsum of the penis has two of these regions that are referred to as the corpus cavernosum, and you can see that these actually have little chambers, as it were, made out of connective tissues that can then fill up with blood, okay, as part of the erectile tissue in that region. Okay, and I remind you of a sexual cycle, since we're in this part of the book. It's a good thing to be sort of apprised of it as a physiological phenomenon. Biology and medical books tend not to see this as a three-part. They tend to see it as a two-part, and I think it's because maybe they're written by men and they're already smoking a cigarette by about here or so. But at any rate, we have three parts if you look at your psychology textbooks that address the more psycho-behavioral aspects of this cycle. And it is a cooperative. It's one of the unique areas of cooperation in the autonomic nervous system, where we have a parasympathetic arousal that allows for filling of erectile tissues throughout the body. And there are emotions that are stimulated through that arousal. There is a climax period, which is a sympathetic experience. It's a whole body experience, because any sympathetic response is more than 50% whole body, because it's a blood-borne event, remember, from the medulla of the adrenal gland. So that's an important thing. Don't be looking for particular places where the climax happens. It happens throughout the body. It's a whole body experience. And then we have another parasympathetic recovery period, which is often ignored in the biology and medical texts, but I'm including it here as possibly one of the premier parts of this three-part system. So part 1, 2, and 3. The recovery period also utilizes the molecule oxytocin, which I like to think of as the cuddle molecule. It's very supportive of emotional bonding at this particular time, right? And so I think some of the smarter couples end up starting in stage 3 and or practice stage 3 on a regular basis without the need of all the other excitement sometimes. But at any rate, there are 3 stages here. So let's press on then to the next diagram here, in which we actually can see how the descent occurs on the very interior over here, where we would normally be thinking of this lateral aspect of the pelvis as we would find ovary. We also find the gonads of the male before birth, and they enter a little, how would I say, drawstring area here, a little tunnel that's referred to as the inguinal canal. And it has an internal ring. It comes down this way. It has the external ring in this region through here, and then the testis, along with all of its equipment that it carries with it, end up in these little condominiums right here. They're actually pushing peritoneum, which we'll be learning about in the digestive system, what we learned about in the digestive system. So we have the 2 layers, the visceral and the parietal peritoneum, which now have an entirely new reference here as the tunica vaginalis. It is actually the peritoneum, but we actually have the 2 layers here of the visceral and parietal tunica vaginalis. Okay, so also coming down here on the outside of the spermatic cord are these muscles that are situated. These are the Cro Master muscles right here, and they can position the testis closer to the body or further from the body for the ideal temperature, which sperm have a tendency to have their inflection curves of growth a little bit below the body temperature of a normal human temperature right there. So we'll pick up the rest in the next part.